We had so much fun on our first episode together that we decided we had to make this a series. So we already have ideas of the next two, I think. But today I welcome back Leonard. Len, we're now friends. Len.
Yes,
Len Finegold, senior partner at Cambridge, construction expertise extraordinaire, and just a wealth of knowledge. And we've actually just been chatting for the last 20 minutes. And I was like, we have to start this podcast. We just did the podcast. So we're going to do it again now in the discussion.
Exactly.
And ironically, I had started this discussion with you around condos. We were trying to think about like what we were going to talk about next, because we could probably talk for days about real estate. And I said, well, condos are such a hot topic. Like, what can we talk about in condos? So we had this whole plan to talk about what would you do if you were going to go and buy a pre-con? Why, there are so many things to consider, but we started talking about what we thought about the market and what we're seeing. So we're actually just going to do an ad hoc, ad lib, what we think right now, because I had said, let's start this episode. First of all, welcome. I got so excited. Welcome, Len.
Thank you, Rachel. Love to be here. Thanks for inviting me back.
No,
Had a lot of fun the first time. It'll be a lot of fun today.
It's going to be great. And so, I said, I think it's a good idea because, I will, full transparency, I've never pushed my clients into pre-con. We actually had a couple times on the conversation, you said, well, you probably know this. And I said, I know enough, but I don't know a ton. And it's because I've never been a fan of pre-con, because I'm very risk adverse with my clients. I know there were a lot of agents that made a ton of money in the pre-con market back in the day because I think they pay more commission. So they decided, hey, that's a great idea. I'm going to go specialize in pre-con and I'm going to make 7% commission or whatever, the sales offices were paying and call it a day. And I just saw the pitfalls. I saw all the things that could go wrong. And I was like, you know what? I think resale's still a good idea. So having said all that, we're now in a totally different era. The days past where you could buy a pre-con and flip it on assignment and make a ton and put it into another investment or pull money out and reinvest it, they're done. Someone asked me the other day about pre-con and I was like, oh my God, please no, not right now. Like not right now.
We're on a long pause.
Very long pause. And going on, the last question you had before we start filming was, how long do I think it's going to take for it to... So I don't have any metrics whatsoever. I can just tell you what I see on a day-to-day basis. So I do feel that the winds have changed. I think that the majority of the doors, as they call them, have been assigned, right? So all the dollars that were coming up for occupancy are basically done. So the big wave is pretty much done. Maybe we've got a couple of projects, but most of it is done. And I would say it's starting to turn, but it's going to take a long time. And when I say long time, I'm not saying like it's going to take a ton of time to get back to an insane, I just think it's going to be this really slow climb of people coming back slowly. I think it might take 2 years just to get to a balanced market where we don't have 9 months of inventory, maybe 3 years. But I'm seeing, like just today, I don't want to jinx it, we put a condo on the market 28 days ago, 2-bedroom, 800 square feet, in a good building, right at Yonge and Shepherd, priced it properly, staged it, looks beautiful, we already got an offer. The last two comparables in the building were on market for 140 days on average. So I do believe that stuff will sell. It's just going to take time. What do you think?
Yes, so there's a lot packed in there
There
to
is.
unpack. But that's a resale. And I look at a different marketplace for resales.
Yeah.
Because then there's a market there that's already existing and people want to come in. You can just walk in. You do the agreement of purchase and sale. You have a 30-day closing. It's all said and done.
Yeah.
You could negotiate the price. You know what you have. You have to move in. It's easier than the pre-con sales because you know what you're dealing with. You know what the risks are. You know the time frames. You don't have to wait 2 or 3 years for the developer to get its approvals. and to get its financing and then to start building, and you're waiting and waiting, waiting on a pre-con. There's a lot of issues, a lot of risk, a lot of uncertainty dealing with pre-con sales. We talked just before the filming started. We could talk a lot about that. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, while we're off camera, I'm dealing now with 3 failed condominium projects in the GTA area.
We're going to get into, not specifics, but yes.
We won't get into specifics, but the consequences to the prospective unit owners, well, they're not owners anymore, they're purchasers, and they're suffering some really legal issues and some fantastic losses and delays in their lifestyle. So we'll talk about that a little later.
And I think that is one of the biggest risks of getting into pre-cons is, I mean, first of all, I will say the biggest mistake you can make is not going with a well-known builder. Sure. So Metropia, Tridel, to name a few, are Daniels. They're not going out of business tomorrow. Okay, they've got this down pat. They know when to start and stop. They've got forecasting done, 5 years, 10 years. That's one. Going with where I believe we saw the biggest issues, and I remember I saw a build in Leslieville. I had a client who was renting there, and they were like, maybe, where they owned a couple of investment properties outside of Toronto, but they rented in Toronto. And they said, you know what, it'd be great to just have a condo, and we can close it up and travel. That's all they wanted, a very low level lifestyle, no heavy lifting. And it was this great boutique build by an unknown builder. And I said, absolutely not. I actually don't even know if that one was built. Mm-hmm. Because you are buying something on a forecast or a plan of, I would say start to finish. What's the average? 5 years?
It all depends on...
If there's no COVID, if there's no major plague,
You can go 2 to 3 years would be fast.
Right. And almost
and that would be the
unheard of,
average, more or less, 2 or 3 years from the time that you sign, depending when you sign. Are you the earlier signers or later signers? Because mostly you need the banks, the financing lenders would want to have 80% signed up before they start lending. I believe that threshold is changing or has changed in the GTA. Oh, can't be confirmed. I think in some areas they're going to want 100%.
By the way, so it'll bring up another pitfall, but so a lot of people don't necessarily know why you might see a sales center with an empty plot of land or that type, or a big sign or whatever, and it's sitting and sitting and sitting. It's sitting because you can't break ground until you hit 80% sold in that building. There's that, I don't know if you know anything about that build that was at Glencairn in Bathurst. No. Also done by independents, deep pockets, so they got it done. It sat there for years. They were asking over $200,000 a square foot. Very niche project, got done, but it took forever to sell the units. But people don't that's what takes so long. It's well, why isn't it being built? They put up the sales center, should be so, and again, gone are the days where you would be fighting to get the friends and family invite to get into a condo. Remember those days when you got in there and got really good rates and then you could flip it later? No one's going to those anymore. So I think that one of the most attractive parts, obviously, in buying a pre-con versus a resale, which is one of the only reasons maybe that I would tell a client, is because you have 2 to 3 years to come up with your final deposit. Not everybody has 10%, 20% if you don't want to be insured to put down on a condo. It's a lot of money to come. These poor kids, they have to come up with what, It's
a challenge.
It's a challenge.
So, Rachel, that would be correct, okay, years ago, but things have changed. The dynamics have changed today. To come up with the money over 2 or 3 years, if you're waiting, you could catch up. Yeah. But in today's marketplace, the interest rates are so volatile. In the low interest rates, you could see that it wouldn't be so bad. But if you sign today and you're going to close in 3 years from now, and you're signing today and interest rates are 3%, right. And when you're ready to close 3 years from now, it's 7%, your math is off, and your financing is off, and your cash flow is off.
Oh, when you close,
and then you're going to need more money when you go to the bank, even though you had a pre-approved financing when you went to see the bank, when you signed the purchase agreement. And they said, yeah, 2 years from now, things are good, we'll give you the money. 3 years later, things have changed, they're gonna say, our threshold's different, you don't have the numbers, either you lost your job or things are happening or things changed in your dynamics or finances, and you're stuck because you already pre-sold. And you have to close unless all the dynamics happen for termination, all the things we talked about, or whether or not you could assign it or sell it to a third party. But what's happening now, there's restrictions on assignments or
you have to
or
pay.
sales. There's
Fees.
There's a fee involved, there's restrictions involved. We won't get into all the legal details, but clearly if you have any interest in doing a pre-con purchase, you got to see a lawyer to make sure that all the rights and obligations that you have that you want to impose on the developer are in your favor, at least to the extent that you can. It's really problematic. We won't get into those details.
No.
But it's going into a minefield.
No, it really is. So let's start from there. So you decide, what, I don't have $100,000. I don't have $150,000, but I think that I could save that over the next couple of years. And there's a pre-con building that's, happening in my neighborhood, and I work close to here. And so I'm going to go in. So you go in, you buy this unit. And so first you need to know that the square footage price is based on their future belief of the value of what this condo will be worth when it becomes available for occupancy.
Right.
No, I feel like anyone who's trying to forecast anything right now should just sit it out. Like, even when I see economists, I think the other day, like, RBC came out with a housing forecast for the second half of the year, and TD had a different one. And you know what? They're both probably wrong. So, I think it's really tough to be able to, to say, they can guarantee you that's how much that condo is going to be worth in 3 years, because we just don't know. And then, because the risk is that 3 years from now, when it comes to occupancy and you get your letter and says, okay, you're going to occupy the unit, which means you get to pay for it. Now you go back to the bank and you say, okay, I need to solidify my mortgage. And they send an appraiser and they go, oh, well, we think it's worth $50,000 less than what you paid for it. What do you do then? You have to come up with that $50,000 delta, or you have to default.
Correct.
And there are a lot of, I think that the majority, and I don't have any data on this is just speculative and things that I've read and heard, is that the majority of the people that you heard about in the headlines about default and this and losing their condos and what were the people that made bad decisions during COVID because money was free. And there were tons of pre-con projects, so you could get and be like, oh, I've got all this extra money, right? Our federal government overpaid by $400 billion or something.
Yeah.
So people have all this money, couldn't go anywhere, have all this extra cash. You know what? I got an extra $50,000. You know what? I'm gonna put a down payment on a new condo. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna own a piece of real estate. Well, owning a real estate is great if you can afford it, and if you do your due diligence and understand what you're getting into.
So those days are in the past.
Gone.
For the next little while.
Yeah, so let's get into that. So you're seeing on your end, because you asked, what do you think is going to change? And I think in the condo market, my perception was that, and again, I don't know how, because they have to make sure the maths, that the builders are going to stop building these condo buildings with tiny little units that are under 500 square feet that you can't really live in, because you can't. Investors don't want them.
Yeah, that's one aspect of it. The other one that we chatted about, and again, trying to forecast where the developer is going to go, because they're going to start building, they're going to continue to building, but of course it's all about, the bottom line, getting some profits on their
it's not a hobby.
No, it's definitely not a hobby. And my experience, my intuition is that as the housing market develops, I think they're going to, for the next couple of years anyways, I think they're going to go into more rentals rather than build, at least in the GTA where affordability is a big issue, and they want to continue building. And of course, they could always eventually, after building a rental building, if they do it in the right way with carry-on approvals at the very beginning to make sure they can convert it at some point in time into condominiums. So they could start as apartments to keep the cash flow going, get people in, there'll be affordability because there won't be down payments. People can start
Right.
earning cash or figure out where their lifestyle is going to be,
Right.
and start hoarding away money for a deposit for
Yeah.
a purchase.
Yeah.
And perhaps at some point in time, they'll convert the condominium into the apartment building into a condominium.
Oh,
It's
that's a
it's
very
happened.
interesting perspective because you hear that, like in co-ops, there'll be those like rumblings that the co-ops are going to convert. But a lot of the problems with that is that the co-ops are, and not to go off topic, but it's an interesting point, they're older buildings and the rules to convert to a condominium corp are like ever changing. And by the time they get this up to code, they're already passed on this one. And so it tends to be harder for them. But new builds, you're saying that could be a potential.
Yeah, for new builds, for sure. But they
Especially
have
if
to
they
plan
have
in
en-suite
advance, and they have to
laundry.
make sure that, depending on how they want to structure it, to ensure that they have the Taran requirements. If ultimately they're going to sell, or they could turn it into a condo right away. They could think apartment and flip really early.
Right.
But once it's an apartment building, then they start converting into condos. There's all sorts of different rules relating to that.
Yep.
But it makes it easier for people to get in, start renting, and then eventually see what happens. But in the interim, they want to keep their business flowing. The condominium developers, they want to keep their business. They already bought properties years and years ago, and they're just throwing money away by paying taxes and charges and the
sure.
like. So at some
For
point in
sure.
time, they want to invest in the property and decide where it's going, particularly in the GTA area. So outside
There's
the
a lot of them that are just, I mean, unless they went into receivership, like the one at Bathurst and Wilson, or, but there are companies like Fitztropia we talked about is banking on this. They're building enormous amount of them right across the city of Toronto. I mean, they're beautiful units. Tridell's getting into it in a big way as well. My question is more, and not to go off topic even that, but to go into the rental part of it is, you know, the newer builds do not have the rent control. So going back to the affordability, you know, we've had people on, you know, come to us for rentals and they're scared to get into these new gorgeous properties because they can hike up the rents, whatever they want. Sorry, we're not in sequence because Joel Kadish interrupted us. Yeah, he's here now, if anyone can hear. Anyway, we have an audience. Len, we now have a what are the studio audience? So we were now just talking, we had another episode off camera, but I like this idea of the 80 to 100 because one of the things that I also, and I've seen happen to clients consistently is they buy something, again, not with me, and then they go to sell it. They're like, okay, no problem. You know, like even like I'll rent it for a year. Let's even say I'm going to rent it for a year. Okay. First of all, you and every other person wants to rent their unit, right? So now it's a race to the bottom to get the best rent you possibly can to at least cover some of your bottom line and your investment. The water's working most of the time. You've got one of 4 elevator banks going. Your concierge just showed up and you're lucky if he's the same person that showed up on day 2, 3, and 4, okay? There may be like power may be out at times. And so super hard to get renters in there. You're living in a construction zone. But if you are trying after that year to sell it, you're at least not competing with the builder who's selling a unit for less because they're just trying to recoup their expenses. Finally, because we're going to dig into your 3 cases before
Sure.
we
Yeah,
sign
before-
off, but
we'll do that.
I one of the things that we talked about was the what'd you call the phantom mortgage?
Call it a phantom mortgage.
Phantom mortgage.
Yes.
So let's say what's an average condo like floors? What do we say, 40? And you buy on 11. Okay, well, they're finished. Do they usually go top down? Is it bottom up? So bottom up. So now they're finishing bottom up and I'm on 11 and 12 still being worked on, but I've got my keys and occupancy for 11 and I don't get to say I don't want to live there. Like the builder's saying it's time for occupancy. So you now need to live there. Let's say even you're the end user. So there's no condo corp created, so you can't pay a mortgage. So you're paying rent that doesn't go towards your mortgage.
Correct.
For how long? A year? 6 months?
For as long as it takes.
For as long as it takes, right? So you're now paying rent on a unit that may not have water on a consistent basis. I once went in to see a client who, again, had bought one without me. And I think it took me 40 minutes to get up to their unit on the 11th floor because the elevator there was only one elevator and everyone was moving in. And I think these are all the things that, are not sold in the sexy sales centers when you walk in. And if you are, like we said, it could leave you homeless.
There's a lot of issues relating to that. It's the occupancy rent that they call it, or a phantom mortgage. When your agreement purchase and sale requires you to move in, whenever it requires you to move in, when they declare there's occupancy and you move in, you have to move in, and you pay the rent and the amenities that you have to pay in terms of all that's built into the rent. And then it will take as long as it takes for them to actually do final closing, and you close on your unit and you actually own the unit. At that point in time, you get the financing. Could be a year later, could be 6 months later.
A year in rent.
It
a
all
year
depends.
in rent, and it did not go to your mortgage.
It all depends on the development, on how fast the construction is going, whether or not there's a hiccup along the way with the developer, a bankrupt contractor who slows things up. Anything could happen to affect and delay the actual final purchase and closing of your unit. When you get the financing, of course, in that circumstance, you never really know when you need to go to the bank and get your financing. Hopefully it's 2 or 3 months later.
Right.
Normally it's not a year later, but usually 2 or 3 months later, depending on the developer and how far along he's in the project, and how big the project is, how tall the project is, where they are. So count on 2 or 3 months, and perhaps a lot longer. In either way, you have no choice. It's built into your agreement. So that really is an issue.
It's a major issue. There's no question. And we talked about projects that were during COVID, and they were, delayed a year, 2 years. I had a client who was waiting for it. And it's fine. They had a house. We were going to sell it once they moved in. It was fine, but it was like, and they were very lucky their timing worked. But what if your timing comes up that you're taking over the condo in the middle of December? I'm not selling your house at top dollar in the middle of Christmas, right? All of these things, and you can't control it.
Yeah, hopefully the rent that you're paying and the cost for the amenities is going to be close to what you would have been paying for your mortgage. Yeah. So you're not, at a loss. At least you're sort of trading one for the other. All you're not getting is capital increase in your property, assuming the property increases in value. It's a tricky game.
It's a very tricky game. And as I always say, the house always wins. I'm telling you, the house always wins. So speaking of bankruptcies, we aren't going to talk about details again of the three cases that you're working on, but one of them we can, because everyone's heard about One Bloor, the Mizrahi build.
Mizrahi building. So there's
by the way, 3 different people reached out to me to ask me if he could be on my podcast. And I said, absolutely, and then none of them responded to me.
It's a very sad story for the purchasers going into these projects that ultimately fail, because the risk is just enormous and the outcome is uncertain. I'm now presently involved with 3 failed projects. One is the One Bloor, the one that's seen a lot of publicity. And like anything else, it was a pre-con sales for everybody else, whoever was there. And it went under the Company Creditors Arrangement Act, which is a federal statute where the court actually controls the process for the completion of the financing and the building of the project in very sequence of events in terms of money being poured into the building to be completed by the savior, the white knight of the financing of the project. Right. And then ultimately they get super priority over everybody, including my clients who are contractors who have lien claims on these projects. And everybody stands back and wait till the project is completed, including the purchasers, knowing whether or not they will ultimately be able to close at the price that they purchased at, or whether or not they're forced by the court system to either top up their price in order to satisfy the requirements of the financing as it goes forward, or they have to walk from their project. Your deposit's protected, so don't worry about that. You will get the deposits, all the deposits, eventually at the end of the day, and your interest on the deposits. But ultimately, after waiting 1, 2, or 3 years, you have no place to go to anymore. And so you've lost the opportunity.
Well, so someone's holding on to all your money. I mean, if you think about those people who, again, not everybody in that building, but like people who scrape together the deposit, they're holding on to it.
So, I mean, the developer holding on to it? The developer is holding on to it, and they probably use it to help finance the project. But in any event, those deposits are protected, they're insured. So everybody will get their deposit back and interest.
If there's money left.
They're insured by third-party insurer, okay, and by Tarion. Okay. So there's no concern.
So everybody who bought into One Bloor will get their deposit back? But now was it Tridel that took it over?
They were the intended purchaser, whether or not they closed the purchase and replaced Mizrahi with Tridel.
I think I saw their sign up.
I believe so. There's some court orders that have been issued. I haven't seen the last of them, but I believe they may have actually closed in some way or other. And I understand anecdotally that they're negotiating with purchasers who are interested in maintaining their unit, but negotiating whether or not they want to add in a couple of dollars, $100,000, $50,000, $1 million, or otherwise disavow their unit and terminate.
I think the bigger picture is it also that, like, when did these people actually walk into One Bloor, decide they want to live there, and that was from, like,
years ago.
4 years, right? So
years ago.
Your whole life, your whole plan, your whole whatever, if you didn't buy it as an investment, is on hold. Your money is there. It may be insured, but you're not getting it back tomorrow. And so you're kind of stuck in limbo. Are you renting this whole time? Are you stuck in a house that you can't afford? Like, I think that, from that standpoint, is the bigger picture and downfall and risk for sure. Although I heard, and I said this to you, I don't know, Joel, we'll just bring you back into did you hear no one bought over like the 30th floor or something in that building? Is that just a rumor? Okay, fine. Anyway, I mean, I think we could talk about condos forever, but I think takeaway for me, I would say is, I think, and I've always felt this way, resales, if you can put the deposit together, and don't worry about the CMHC fees. Like, the first house I ever bought, I had CMHC fees. I cobbled it together, it was what I could afford, the bottom line, and I did it, and I built my equity, and I moved on in my life and my home ownership. But you know, like you said, and you started this out, buying a resale, it's safer, you know exactly what you're getting, you're going to move in tomorrow, and there's much less risk. And I do believe it's going to come back. I do believe it's going to come back. And when I say come back, not craziness, no, but I think there's still going to be a demand, because at this moment, nothing is being built. And if we add not your speculation, but what you're hearing and chatter in your corners of the world, is that if these condo builders are moving in the direction of rental purpose builds, we're even more so, that many more years past having even more units to sell. And we do. I mean, I don't know, what do we get? 7 million immigrants in Canada?
Yeah, there's going to be demand for housing,
2 million immigrants in the last year. I mean, and I don't think they're putting a cap on anything. So they're all going to the GTA. They're not going, although we could have a whole other episode about Halliburton and Muskoka, but that's where the majority of these people are going. Len, a pleasure.
Thank you.
Always.
Thank you, Rachel.
And I'm going to announce it. The next one, because Len is building a house in Costa Rica. And so, yeah, Joel's he's gonna ask for an invite. He is building a house in Costa Rica. And so for anyone who's actually thinking about, I don't know, maybe having a vacation home, moving out of Canada, moving to a different country and building while you're still here, we will have Len back to talk about that. All the joys and tribulations.
All the joys and fun of building outside of Canada.
Exactly.
Away from home,
yep.
Where you're building by Zoom.
Yeah, we will have you back to talk about that. Thank you so much, Len.
Glad to be back. I'll
Thank
look
you.
forward to it.